American bison and the tallgrass prairie are symbols of the Great Plains and our great state. The two essentially need each other to survive.
America's Great Plains lost something far larger than an animal species, and every restoration attempt since has hit the same wall. But bison are now doing what no federal program has managed to achieve. The mechanism triggering that recovery isn't visible from the air. It's underground. And scientists are only beginning to understand why nothing else can replicate it. 3 centuries ago, climbing any rise on the central Great Plains meant looking toward a horizon where the ground itself appeared to move. 60 million bison spread across a grassland corridor stretching through 14 states, from Texas north into Canada, from the Mississippi River west toward the Rockies. This was not simply a wildlife population living on a landscape, it was a population actively building one. Every herd that moved left behind churned soil, scattered seed, and grazed down grass that sparked new growth cycles. The prairie and the bison were not separate systems that happened to share the same territory. They were one system. Remove either half, and the other begins to fail. Rescuing America's lost prairie today comes down to one foundational question. Can a biological system be rebuilt by returning the single organism that made it function? The answer depends entirely on what happened during the 60 years that followed this abundance, and how completely 60 million animals were reduced to a remnant that fits inside a single county fairground. By the 1820s, commercial hunters were already working the southern plains, selling hides east and to Europe. But the operation stayed manageable until the railways arrived. The transcontinental lines didn't just cut the prairie in half, they turned it into a delivery system. A hunter could kill a bison in Kansas on a Tuesday and have its hide on a tannery floor in Philadelphia by Friday. Suddenly, slaughter scaled. The rifles scaled with it. Purpose-built, long-range, heavy-caliber weapons let a single hunter drop dozens of animals from a stationary position. Entire herds grazed placidly, while animals at the edge dropped one by one. There was no panic because bison had never evolved a fear response to something they couldn't smell or see. But the hide market alone couldn't have finished the job. What completed it was deliberate military strategy. Army commanders openly directed hunters to eliminate bison as a mechanism for eliminating the plains nations who depended on them. One general reportedly said, "The hunters were doing more to resolve the Indian question than the entire army combined." By 1889, the count stood at 501 animals across all of North America. Tens of millions reduced to a number that wouldn't fill a high school gymnasium. What the prairie lost when those animals vanished turns out to be far more than a species. Today, only 5% of the original tallgrass prairie remains. The rest became cornfields, cattle pasture, and subdivision. Once prairie converts to cropland, the ecological clock essentially stops. Restoration isn't a matter of pulling weeds. It requires rebuilding a biological relationship that took thousands of years to calibrate. What makes this collapse truly remarkable is the economic wreckage it left behind. A 2024 study by Fair, Gillizeau, and Jones, published in the Review of Economic Studies, mapped a direct, quantified link between bison extirpation and plains economic collapse. The disappearance of bison didn't just devastate indigenous nations ecologically, it structurally dismantled the economic foundation of entire plains communities. The herd wasn't just wildlife, it was the engine. The question that follows is almost uncomfortable. If a single species could hold an economy and an ecosystem simultaneously, what specifically was it doing to the land that made that possible? The answer runs 15 feet underground, and that's where everything changes. Tallgrass prairie plants evolved under one very specific pressure. A massive, migratory herd that grazed hard, moved on, and came back unpredictably. That rhythm is everything. Because when a bison herd passes through and strips a patch of grass to the soil, the plant doesn't die. It pushes harder downward. Over centuries, that repeated pressure drove root systems 15 feet deep into the earth, creating the most carbon-dense soil on the planet. And the bison weren't just grazing, they were engineering. When a bison wallows, it creates something a cattle herd simply cannot, a microhabitat. Bare soil, altered drainage, disturbed seed beds. Studies show that bison wallows more than double plant diversity compared to areas grazed by cattle alone. That single behavior, repeated across millions of animals, across millions of acres, patterned an entire continent's biodiversity. Their dung seeded the prairie as they walked. Their hooves cracked hard-pan soil open for water infiltration. Their migration paths, too long for fences and too wide for modern ranches, set the conditions for fire, the natural burns that cleared dead biomass and triggered fresh growth. Remove the bison, and every one of those mechanisms stalls simultaneously. The roots shallow out, the plant diversity flattens, the fire cycle breaks, the soil seals. In 1993, the Nature Conservancy acquired a former cattle ranch in northeastern Oklahoma. The grass was there, technically, but it was flattened, monotonous, and biologically hollow. Decades of uniform cattle pressure had turned a complex, layered ecosystem into something closer to a lawn. They released 300 bison onto it. Within years, the herd had grown. By the early 2000s, the preserve supported over 2,000 animals, the largest protected tallgrass remnant in existence. More importantly, the land responded. Wallow depressions reappeared. Plant diversity rebounded in grazed patches. Fire cycles could be managed again because the herd was cropping fuel unevenly, exactly as wild grazing pressure does. The cattle ranch had produced a single-note landscape. The bison produced texture. This is the proof of concept that conservationists had been arguing was possible, and critics had been insisting was too complicated, dangerous, and too impractical to attempt at scale. Here's what critics never fully appreciated. Bison are not cattle wearing different coats. They don't move on cues, don't respond to dogs, and a startled animal weighing close to a ton can cover ground faster than most people expect. Annual roundups at the Tallgrass Preserve use helicopters and truck convoys, funneling animals through temporary corridors that took years to refine. Each animal gets a rapid health assessment before release. What makes this operationally significant isn't just the difficulty, it's that the controlled chaos is the mechanism. Herd size must stay calibrated to carrying capacity, cull the wrong animals, and genetic diversity, already fragile from the 541 animal founder pool, erodes further. Now someone has to decide whether any of this happens at a national scale and actually pay for it. That decision came through Secretary's Order 3410, issued by the U.S. Department of the Interior before January 2025. What made it structurally different from earlier conservation gestures? Money was attached. Over $25 million from the Inflation Reduction Act, committed specifically to scaling bison restoration beyond isolated preserves like Tallgrass into something genuinely continental. But what the order does, that funding alone cannot, is legitimize indigenous knowledge as a core scientific input, not supplementary folklore, but a co-equal framework alongside conventional ecology. Tribes managed bison landscapes for thousands of years before a single federal biologist existed. Building their methods into the official restoration architecture is probably not a coincidence, given that tribal programs have consistently outperformed government-only efforts on every measurable outcome. The mechanism is partnership rather than mandate. Federal land opens doors. State and tribal coordination keeps herds moving across jurisdictional boundaries that bison, obviously, cannot read on a map. The federal framework opened the door, but who actually walked through it first and kept walking long after the press releases faded? Indigenous nations. The Intertribal Buffalo Council now coordinates restoration across more than 80 member tribes, managing roughly 20,000 bison on approximately 1 million acres of tribal land. And what makes tribal programs structurally different from any federal initiative is the motivation layered beneath the ecology. Bison restoration for indigenous nations simultaneously reclaims ecological function and cultural identity, two things that were deliberately stripped away together during the same era of the Great Slaughter. Returning the herd is not metaphor, it is material sovereignty. The Blackfeet Nation in Montana manages a herd directly descended from the original 541 animal population floor. The Rosebud Sioux tribe runs one of the largest tribally managed herds in the Dakotas. The Fort Belknap Indian community has reintroduced bison across tens of thousands of reservation acres, with measurable grassland recovery already documented at active grazing sites. But tribal programs operate outside federal land constraints entirely, meaning they can move faster, adapt management to local ecological conditions, and scale without bureaucratic delay. Roughly 365,000 bison exist across North America today. Around 85% live in commercial herds, bred for meat, managed like cattle, and often crossbred with domestic cattle genetics. Strip those away, and the true conservation population sits somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 animals scattered across federal refuges, tribal lands, and private preserves. That gap matters for a reason deeper than raw headcount. Every bison alive today descends from that 541 animal founder pool. Geneticists call that a bottleneck, and what it means in practice is that a species carrying 10,000 years of prairie engineering instinct is doing it with a dangerously narrow genetic foundation. Some conservation herds already show measurable inbreeding depression. The blueprint for rebuilding a continent is being redrawn from a document with half the pages missing. What makes the numbers truly alarming is the ecological threshold question. How many bison does a prairie actually need to trigger the soil turnover, wallow formation, and migratory grazing pressure that restores function? Researchers estimate ecologically functional herds require thousands of animals moving across hundreds of thousands of contiguous acres. The largest single conservation herd in the country sits right at the lower edge of that threshold. 20,000 conservation bison scattered across a fragmented continent is not a recovery. It is a foothold. But here is what that foothold is actually producing. The numbers from active restoration sites are not theoretical. Soil carbon is the headline. At sites where bison have grazed continuously for more than a decade, researchers are recording soil organic carbon gains that cattle-managed land simply does not show. At the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Oklahoma, plant species diversity has measurably increased since 1993. Areas under bison pressure support roughly twice the native forb and grass variety compared to adjacent cattle range. Water retention tells an equally stark story. Prairie soil under long-term bison management holds moisture longer and infiltrates rainfall faster than compacted cattle pasture. In drought years, that retention gap becomes the difference between a living grassland and bare, cracked earth. What makes this data genuinely significant is the policy implication it carries. They are quantifiable carbon sequestration rates, measurable biodiversity indices, and hydrological data that slot directly into climate mitigation frameworks. Bison restoration is not ecological nostalgia dressed up for a nature documentary. It is a land management intervention with a verifiable before and after ledger. The prairie gets back its soil structure, its water, its plant communities, its functional relationship with fire, but none of that compounds further unless the foothold expands. And what stands between a foothold and a recovery is a set of obstacles that are neither small nor disappearing. The data is compelling, the science is settled, and the mechanism is proven. What remains is whether the political and economic machinery of 21st century America will allow the recovery to actually scale. The trajectory, on paper, looks promising. The American Bison Society's restoration framework targets 1 million acres of connected conservation habitat by 2030, with participating herds growing toward genuine ecological function. Tribal programs across the Great Plains continue expanding, many operating independently of federal timelines, which matters more now than it did 2 years ago. The Intertribal Buffalo Council's member nations currently steward roughly 20,000 animals across more than 1 million acres, and those numbers are climbing without Washington's permission. But the obstacles are structural, not symbolic. Land fragmentation is the sharpest constraint. The Great Plains is a patchwork of private cattle ranches, state boundaries, and fenced corridors that bison cannot biologically function within. Ranching industry groups have historically pushed back hard against federal restoration efforts, framing expanding herds as direct competition for grazing land. That resistance did not disappear. And the political climate shifted sharply after January 2025. Secretary's Order 3410 and the Inflation Reduction Act funding that underpinned the federal restoration commitment now sit in uncertain territory. Programs dependent on federal coordination face real delays. What that means is this: the recovery's center of gravity is shifting toward tribal sovereignty, private conservation partnerships, and state-level agreements. The prairie taught one lesson across 30 years of restoration. The bison do not need permission to rebuild the soil. They need room. 60 million animals once darkened the horizon. Today, roughly 30,000 wild bison graze public land. Enough to prove the floor held, not enough to call it finished. Secretary's Order 3410 and 25 million pointed toward something real. Funding stalled. The prairie is still waiting, but the wallows are returning. So, are the questions worth asking?